Too much of pressure. Okay, excuse us if the images get a bit stretched. I think the format is completely different. The screen size is completely different. Uh, yeah. So rather than uh, showing our projects, I thought we could just tell our story, our journey, which started from 2001 when we came as trainees, worked in CNT, and then went on to work with Mindspace. From the time that we started our own practice, I think it would be nice to understand what it was when we came in as our students. I think our whole idea was, kind of see what we really wanted to do. And I think two studios that came to our mind even at that time was Sangat and Tadavando's studio. And we really looked up to the studios and aspired to have a studio someday of ourselves. So I think it's so important that when you start off your internship or you're starting your first job, you really have to find a right place and you have to be in that right place at the right time. And I think luckily, fortunately for us, we were at the right place in the right time in CNT in 2000 and 2001 when we came to do our internship. And the idea of learning, I think one thing that really, the first impression of CNT that came to our mind is when you walk in, I think that tree which was there, the katte which was there, I think it almost had that resemblance of a Gurukul. It had that where people would, just sit, discuss, we would have learn from each other. And I think this is a perfect picture that really carries back even now when we work. I think we really look forward to this picture, and this image is set in our minds. I think another aspect of being in CNT was, I think we had mentors around. There was a lot of knowledge, there was a lot of inspiration, but I think you had to choose. I mean, probably you could learn without even talking to another person. It was just in the air, as they say. You could really talk, you could really, see. There were people working on another project. There was never a closed environment. I think everything was open for everyone to see. And that's when I call being at Clovia, because you are even if you're not working on that project, you still know everything about that project. And I think that's something which we learned very much as a part of our stint in CNT. Just 3 projects, I will just images, and these are things that all 3 of us work. So Srinidhi School, RBI, and Unilever. And these are memories that we took when we started our own practice. Things that we learned, I think first thing that we learned was that space is experiential and not something that is to be kind of as a form based. And I think these were like the codes that were really driven into our minds all the time, that it had to be a simple solution to the most complex problem. Context was very important, light, color, texture, and that whole idea of making it timeless. There are so many things that you can take from these places. Celebrate, I think we really knew how to celebrate work. We really knew how to enjoy work. We really knew how to celebrate each other's success. All the memories that you build across the whole 7 or 8 years that we worked there. Everybody was, ready to actually share and learn from each other. Till in 2009, we really decided, 3 of us, Arun and Advita, we decided to start in one of our picnics in Goa. So we decided to start a firm. This is something that we strive as a firm to do. A good design is when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. So I think this is what our whole aim or the motto of our firm is. I'll just run you through our studio. So the first thing that we really wanted to do, since we had worked in a place in a firm, we really wanted to have a studio of our own. And our studio has evolved in the period that we have started our firm. So 2012, we just had finances were low, so we really had to make do with whatever we could get. And then, as the studio started evolving and we started experimenting, that's the time when we started really experimenting with materiality. And then this is what we are just doing. Scales became bigger, and then we had to shift, maybe make another flow for ourselves. The most important part of our studio is the people. We 3 are just what I would say, just a part of that imperfect picture, but when everybody comes along is when this whole picture becomes perfect. and that's when we call it as a perfect collage. That's the team of collage. So when we started this firm, we really wanted, it was that process of learning to unlearn, and the reason being, we were working, and that's a scale that we were working at. If you look at it, that's HLL in 2006. And then suddenly when we started our own practice, we were really, we had to really start with that one dot over there. So that was our first project, that was our first commission which we got. And whatever we had learned, so to kind of implement it in the smaller scale, so whether it's a 30-40 or a 30-50, it really got us, it was probably difficult, but in the end, because our foundations were so strong, we could really get it maybe near to perfect. And those are the two houses in section and in terms of the visual. So sections actually played a very important role as a part of our design, whatever we learned in the firms that we worked on. So as our project started growing bigger, the same elements started appearing in most of our larger projects as well. So when it was a 40-60, we started a little bit more experimenting on material, the way we could use light a bit differently, and really not being bothered about the end product, because this was a project which we finished, and by the time we finished, the whole house was covered by the tree, and we really didn't bother whether that was the impression what we had started off with. We really liked this impression where the tree covers it and the project itself is in oblivion. This project started getting scaled up, and this was a house that we were doing in Goa. So earlier, if you see, we really didn't put the footprint because we were really building almost the whole of the site, because that's what happens when you're having smaller projects. But then this was the first project where we had bigger site, but the footprint had to be smaller. This is a house that we did in Goa. The sections became a little bit more simpler in terms of levels that because we had that space, we could work out a bit more linear or expand it in one direction. And that's a house in Goa that we did. So here is where we started a little bit more experimentation with color, trying to kind of use the whiteness of the contrast of, to add a contrast to the whiteness with little bit of exposed concrete. In terms of even light, because Goa is a really hot, you get really harsh, if you have a skylight, then it becomes really harsh inside. We tried to use this acrylic rods in the slab to get that little bit of skylight, tried to get as much as possible the diffuse skylights. And then this was a phase where we, kind of started a little bit probably bolder and started using brick as an element. This is a house which we did in Mysore, and the filler slab here, part of the filler slab almost, we cut the pots and it became a skylight. So this is another house we did during the same time. It's a guest house in Mysore, and we used brick, again a little bit of metal, concrete. So whatever we had learned in our previous projects, we started implementing it here. And of course then came where we had to use material, stone, and polish versus the matte of materials. These were things that we were trying to understand. And then again there was a phase where we came back to the urban context, but still we had a larger site, and you could leave a little bit of spaces, but keep the ethos of the section or keep the ethos of space the same. So this is another house we did around, I think 2020, which we finished. Very linear plot, and we kind of worked with a section where you had one side as the public space and another side as the private space with this double height living room. Again, our experimentations with light and how that, the house is called 50 mm because each of these squares are 50 mm, and it goes through as a pattern in the entire house, whether it's a skylight or the screen wall. Again, this, the same what we had probably used as those circular rods in one of the earlier, we used this as square rods, and probably that was like our trial to arrive at something like this. Again, these are two houses which we were doing almost at the same time and got over at the same time. The footprint was less. This was a house which, next, we call it as a house of nooks and corners. The idea was that there was a front yard, there was a backyard, and literally we kind of, through the section, you had the courtyard in the center, but also what we tried to do was take the green right up on the first floor and the second floor. And there's always that seamless kind of a transition between the outside court and the back court, with the central court as the space which leads to both of this. So this is a project we're just in progress. These are two projects in progress. So this is more like what we have learned on all this and then probably still trying to learn. So this was a house which was slightly bigger, and then the same idea of that 50/80 where you had the front and the backyard, but we just shifted the built spaces. So one is the public, the other one is a private space, and you had almost like an atrium with bridge connecting both the spaces. So the section was very simple. So the client also wanted it very simple, but we had this one singular skylight which ran through the space right from the top and then came right down on both sides. So it was almost like a split house. Next. So this is almost getting completed, but that's the one bridge which connects both the activities. So on the right hand side, you see in the central picture, you see is the living, the living, the family, the informal living, and then on top you have the informal living and a guest room, while on this side is all the master bedrooms and the kids' bedroom. And this bridge is the one which connects both of the spaces with this atrium, which will probably have 3 trees and a very zen-like kind of a space. And this is the last, this is just on the drawing board, and I thought it would be apt to show this as a section. So that's something that we are looking at. This is more a squarish, but almost that idea of that same section which starts getting, I think the proportions are a bit wrong, but that's what we were looking at. I mean, the same as a sectional perspective, that's how we are looking at it as a space. So this is what we've done in the residential, and now just looking back at what we could do in the same aspects as a public space. So we were first assigned to do a marketing center or more like experiential center for Rohan, and this is a space which was like left over in the setback area where there were a lot of trees. So we really had to build this whole space almost like it's woven between these trees. So these are like just plains where the trees start getting, kind of framed, or they just form a space within them. So similar, again, an experience center, but this time it was with coconut trees, and the plane started becoming more curved, and the whole direction of reaching to your final place changed, because as in the earlier one, it was more of straight on, while in this case, it's more like a mystery. So you walk past these curved surfaces, and only then you reach what you're supposed to be going for. So there was this really nice play for both these projects, which we really enjoyed working with, because these are projects which of course get built, and then within maybe two or 3 years they are down, and you really don't know. The memories that remain are only these photographs for us. So for the first time, actually, we got our institutional, like maybe a school, a small school, and I mean, all thanks to Mohe only. So he referred us to a client, and this was the first time we were doing a school. Again, it was a very urban site, which was like 50 by 84,000 square feet, and the aspirations of the client were almost 13,000 square feet. So we really had to cut down his aspirations of really building less, and we told him you could use the classrooms as a multifunctional space, and you don't have to have classrooms for varied spaces or varied requirements. So each classroom could function differently at different times. And we again worked with this strong section where it allowed us to do so. You had a double height classroom somewhere, you had a classroom which opened out into the atrium space, you had different scales even in terms of interiors. For the kid, the doors were smaller or larger based on the teacher's entry or the kid's entry. This project, we kind of really took one element, that's the Channapatna toys, and the railing was made as almost that playful journey as the kids come out of the space, and they could make their own forms, and they could play around with these railings at any point of time. So that itself is like a character which goes through with these running bridges which connect the classrooms at different levels. Again, another forgotten art we used, that was the crochet to kind of shield the skylights heat coming, or the sun rays coming down into the atrium. Acrylic sheets with color to just get that little bit of playfulness to the pool in the on the top floor. Slowly, I think the journey continued, and it's the same thing which happened to us from the residential segment, and it started happening to us in the public segment. Then we started getting another school, which the context here was not the trees, but the context here was the existing school, which was probably 100 years old, but not well maintained, but they still had to keep it like that, and they really wanted to keep it as their heritage building. But at the same time, they really didn't want that to be focus. So we really put this block in the center, and as you come in, this next. So as you come in, you really, yeah, so you actually don't really see the school building behind, but what happens is you create that whole kind of a mystery again, that you come, you are directed, taken in through a smaller pathway, and then get out, and then only you see the building behind. So that's the section. So if you're coming in from the main, that's the driveway where you come across, what you see is a courtyard, and then we literally block that building behind. So you don't see that building. It's only when you take the left and then come back, that's when you see the old building. Even here, whatever we had learned in terms of multifunctional classroom, so you have a classroom with a mezzanine, you have a classroom which again opens out into different levels. It opens out into the balcony outside. So those are few of the images that just getting ready. So this is a project we are doing in Goa, and this project also had a lot of trees. This was a competition project which we won. Here the challenge was that it was a small project, but ideally they wanted it as an institute and as a commercial segment. So the commercial part was the auditorium, and the institute was about 5 classrooms. So being Goa, we really thought that it should be almost like that central spine along which both this activities are divided, but that central spine should be very tropical and very open, and it should really, it's almost like walking in a forest kind of a situation. So we kind of developed this section where on the left-hand side the auditorium is on the left-hand side with the court, while on the right-hand side is this space which is as a dining. So this is a street view. So there was a level difference. So you come in from the auditorium, step down, and that becomes almost like a courtyard or a street, and then you have the dining, and it further opens out down. The classrooms were kept at the higher level with the office on one side as a part of the section. So that's what we are looking at as you come in, and then. So those are the bridges which start, a few sections. So we work a lot with this section. This is a school again. This is a larger institute that we are doing now. Again, a competition. It's for the hearing and speech. It's a hearing and speech institute in Bangalore. So again, here we were really looking at spaces which started, like you have certain interactive spaces within the building, but you start really connecting it to the lower level, and you have spaces even at the higher level which start becoming like interactive spaces. So you enter through this large space which is almost like a rotunda, and that becomes the focal point for both the institutes, and then that's when your journey starts happening and you start getting into the space. And this is that space what you saw as a section. So you climb up, or you have these platforms at various levels where you start, have these interaction zones with each other. And eventually you reach to this kund. So this was, the context was there was a lake. So you reach across the kund is at the end part of it, and then this whole idea of, revealing and unrevealing at certain points is kind of taken care over here. And these were the existing trees, so you almost meander through these trees and reach your final, probably the kund over here. So the last group is the housing. So these are 3 typologies that we generally work on. So when it came to housing, I think in 2010 or 12 is when the first client came to us, and this was a standalone building with about 50 apartments. So we were really trying to fit in how we could, use the same idea of this volumes into a section. And it was very difficult to convince the client first, because knowing a builder, I think he really was not sure whether we would be able to achieve the whole FSI and the numbers. But then once we showed him the chart that it was possible, I think he was convinced, and now it is very easy to convince him for this kind of spaces. So this were like 8 units which were connected by this, all were 2 BHKs, but the 3rd bedroom got connected at different levels, and each of this became like double-height terraces within this whole built mass. And then when Rohan, Suhas has been a great mentor to us in terms of work, and he always encourages us all the time. So when he approached us to do Rohan Avriti in Bangalore itself, we kind of took that same module of that single tower and then started working because these were 5 towers, so we started working towards combining them or making them as a composition or whatever we had done in the first project. And that's how it is. So it's almost very similar, but the scales are larger, the towers become more, and the principles that we had applied in the first housing project, we kind of applied it over here, and eventually we went on to do another apartment for them. So it's, which were almost similar. So this is a phase where we are again going through in a new, this is what is on board and is just getting completed, where you add a little bit, convince the builder to add a little bit of texture or materiality to the building itself. Yeah, and the last, I think, what we really learned, I think from Mrs. C and Thakur and even Mindspace is that the idea of giving back. And that was something which has been really stuck with us in through our hearts, because I think I remember there was a times when Mrs. C would be caring about us. If we have worked in the night and somebody has sneezed or been coughing continuously, she would call up in the morning and say, who's this person? Please take him to the doctor. And she would make sure that the person that goes to the doctor has been sent to the doctor and attended to. So I think that's something which we really learn. Small way, maybe, we do a lot of work for Unnati. Unnati is an organization which helps this underprivileged kids to, in terms of skill development. One of them is in our office. It's a live example because he started with us as an office boy. Today he is like our IT head. He is, running the finances. He's everywhere. He does the installation which was done for IIID last year with that moving thing was done by him. And I think we really fortunate enough to have him in our office. And I think we really need to give back to this particular organization because they really develop a lot of kids like this. So this is what we are doing for them right now. This is an auditorium and a community center in Kasturi Nagar. So the whole idea of taking the steps all the way up into a larger community space, because it's a very tight side, I mean, they always get this tight side, and taking it to a higher level, so you actually climb through this series of steps and reach at a higher level, where it almost becomes like an amphitheater, which is at probably about 3 floors above. And that's how, I think this is something which this is a statement that I would really take to heart, and this is what we learned. There's passion. There was passion there back then. We still have discipline in terms of work, because you should probably respect the profession that you have come from, and consistency. I think these are 3 things, and we really strive to take these 3 things, continue as we move into our journey further. This is how we were into it. And this is what a few gray hairs, a little bit of fat somewhere, and receding hairlines. I think we move ahead.